You've seen the picture, right? The wild-eyed prophet raving on a street corner. It's a classic image from movies, from books, but is that real? Today, we're going to dig into the mind of the prophet and find out if they were truly mad or if something else entirely was going on.
All right, so let's get right into it. There's this long-standing idea, this theory, that the prophets of ancient Israel were, well, ecstatic figures, caught up in these wild, almost abnormal behaviors. But the big question is, does the evidence we have from history, from the texts themselves, actually back that up?
So first things first, let's look at the case for the mad prophet myth. This idea didn't just come out of nowhere, right? It's actually built on some specific things you can find in the ancient texts. Certain behaviors, even labels that, if you just look at them on the surface, they really do seem to point to some kind of frenzy or, mental instability.
And people who support this theory usually point to 4 key pieces of evidence. You've got these really strong emotional outbursts. Then there are the strange, symbolic things they did in public. A big one is how they spoke for God in the first person, saying, "I will do this." And, maybe the most obvious one, they were literally called madmen sometimes.
So, that sounds like a pretty solid case, doesn't it? But, okay, let's put on our investigator hats for a minute. We're going to break this down and look at each piece of evidence, one by one, and see if it really holds up when you dig a little deeper. Okay, Exhibit A, speaking in the first person, as if they are God. Now, hearing a prophet say, "I, the Lord, will do this," yeah, that can sound a little weird to us today. You might think, whoa, this guy's lost his sense of self. But here's the thing. Back in the ancient Near East, that was actually the standard operating procedure for any messenger.
And it wasn't just for divine messages either. It was basically a communication style, a way to make it crystal clear that the messenger wasn't giving their own opinion, but the exact words of the person who sent them. In fact, we see the exact same thing from a regular non-prophetic messenger for King Sennacherib of Assyria. He wasn't in a frenzy. He was just doing his job the right way.
All right, but what about Exhibit B, the madman label? Come on, you can't get much more direct than someone pointing at a prophet and calling them a madman, can you? Well, as it turns out, context is absolutely everything here.
Let's take a look at this classic example. The Roman governor, a guy named Festus, shouts at the Apostle Paul, "You are out of your mind." So what was Paul doing? Was he foaming at the mouth, raving? No, not at all. He had just calmly explained to Festus that Jesus Christ had risen from the dead.
And that really shows us what's going on. The accusation of madness wasn't some kind of medical diagnosis. It was a way to dismiss someone. Think about it. When a prophet shows up with a message that's radical, that challenges everything you believe, what's the easiest way to not deal with it? You attack the messenger. You call them crazy.
Okay, so if the prophets weren't just raving madmen, then what exactly was happening? Because the texts definitely describe some pretty intense, otherworldly experiences. If it wasn't this wild, out-of-control frenzy, then what kind of ecstasy was it?
Well, the evidence seems to point to a really powerful alternative. Forget the idea of a wild, erratic frenzy. Instead, think of it more like a focused, visionary trance. It wasn't about losing your mind. It was about your mind being, well, redirected.
Here's a way to think about it. It wasn't about passing out or losing consciousness. It was more like your consciousness was sort of untethered from your normal physical senses, allowing it to tune in to another reality. So you're seeing visions, you're hearing things from a divine source, but you're still awake and fully conscious.
And what's really cool is that the original language totally backs this up. The Greek word used in the Bible to describe this state is ekstasis. Now we get our modern word ecstasy from that, but its literal meaning is simply trance. It implies a state of deep, profound focus, not, chaotic frenzy.
So, this all leads to a really fascinating mystery, right? If a divine message comes in a vision, how does it get translated and spoken through a unique human being with their own personality? Is the prophet just a hollow tube like a microphone, or is there something more going on?
The idea that really seems to fit is something called the organic view of inspiration. And the belief here is that God doesn't just wipe the prophet's personality clean. No, he intentionally uses it. He works through their unique background, their way of speaking, their emotional quirks, their whole life experience. It all becomes part of how the message is delivered.
I love this quote because it paints such a perfect picture. It says the divine message is like pure white light. And the human prophet? They're the prism. The prism doesn't distort the light. It actually reveals the light's hidden beauty, breaking it down into this rich spectrum of colors.
So, far from being these rambling, incoherent madmen, what we actually see are masters of communication.
I mean, these guys were using incredibly sophisticated literary tools to make their messages powerful and unforgettable. This was craftsmanship. It was art, not just random raving.
If you look at their toolbox, it's just filled with these powerful literary devices. We're talking vivid, forceful imagery, really intricate poetry, and some of the most clever and memorable plays on words you'll ever see. I mean, this stuff shows a deep mastery of language. That's just not what you get from someone who's lost control.
Check out this incredible example from the prophet Jeremiah. God shows him a vision and asks, "What do you see?" Jeremiah says, "An almond tree." In Hebrew, that's shaked. Then God replies, "That's right, because I am watching over my word to perform it." And the Hebrew word for watching, it's shaked. Shaked, shaked. It's this brilliant, clever pun that makes the message unforgettable. And that requires a sharp, creative mind, not a frenzied one.
All right, so let's bring this all together. We've seen the evidence doesn't really point to madness, which brings us to the most crucial question of all. If they weren't mad, why on earth were they so often treated like they were? Well, the answer, it turns out, had almost nothing to do with their state of mind. It wasn't about their speaking style or how clever they were with words.
No, the real reason was the radical nature of their message. It's as simple as that. These guys were speaking truth to power. They were calling out corruption and injustice wherever they saw it. And frankly, that made them incredibly dangerous to the people in charge.
Just imagine you're a powerful king, and the prophet Jeremiah shows up and says something like this: "Woe to him who builds his palace by unrighteousness, making his countrymen work for nothing." I mean, he's calling you out, publicly, for exploiting people. When a message is that direct and that threatening, you can't really argue with it on the merits. So what do? You attack the messenger. You call him crazy. It's the oldest trick in the book for getting rid of an uncomfortable truth.
So in the end, the mad prophet myth seems to be less of a real diagnosis and more of, well, a defense mechanism. It's a way to shield yourself from a message you just don't want to hear. And that leaves us with a pretty powerful question, one that echoes from the ancient world right into our own.